All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome everybody. I just want to take a minute and thank you for being here and for joining us for our second decision coach learning call. So, similar to last call's agenda, we're going to go through some introductions, some brief announcements. The meat of today's meeting will be focused on some new case studies, some new applications that we found with Allovance, as well as we have two guest speakers, Kevin Ruzinski and Barnaby Pung, who will talk to us a little bit more about how they've applied Allovance with one of their clients. So we're going to go into a little bit of a detailed case study presentation. This is similar to the presentation we had last time by Mohammed. Once that's finished, we'll go ahead and go into some decision coach program and software updates. I've got some pretty exciting new updates for the software to share with you. And then we'll go into some appreciations and then review topics for the next call. Now, I really want to make this, collaborative and so please, if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, go ahead and write them in the chat. We'll have someone constantly looking through the questions, and then towards the end, when we're on our coach town hall, we'll go ahead and answer all those questions and open it up for a conversation. Additionally, just some housekeeping items. If you can be muted if you're not talking, that would be great, just in case there's some unexpected turbulence or interference or something like that. Also, last time we had our call, we took like 20 minutes in the beginning of the meeting to introduce everyone, say a little thing about ourselves. We're becoming a kind of a bigger group, and just for the sake of not wanting to repeat that exercise, a lot of you guys already know each other. Let's go ahead and introduce ourselves in the chat, please. So if you can just write like a quick, hi, my name is, so-and-so, and this is where I work, just so we can get an idea of who's on the call, that would be wonderful. Now, before we get into the meat of the program here, we have just a couple of quick announcements. Well, actually, let me introduce the team first. So Sharif is the founder and CEO. Myself also is on this call. We've got from EGI, Stephanie, who is our decision coach project manager, Ashley, who is the decision coach program lead, and then from the Allovance team, Barnaby. As I've mentioned before, we'll have special presentations today from Kevin, who's part of the EGI team, as well as Barnaby, who's a decision coach as part of the Allovance team. Now, our founder has just a couple of just introduction announcements to do. So if you want to go ahead and say something.
Yeah, so I just want to welcome everybody. I mean, it warms my heart to see like how much we're growing. And actually expanding, not just here in the United States or in Michigan, but expanding in the United States and around the world. So right in this call here, Wael is primarily here and in Dubai. We have Alberto's in Brazil. We're starting to expand and we're starting to get the word out. And the interesting thing that's happening right now is that the variety of applications that Allovance being used for multiple organizations. I mean, recently, personally, I was involved with Kayo, who's, his real name is Arcadio, but yeah, yeah, he's the one who's waving. So Kayo and I went to Dominica. Dominica is an island in the Caribbean. It's not Dominican Republic. It's another island in the middle of the ocean, literally. And he and I went there, and the reason we went there is that those Caribbean islands are getting devastated by hurricanes. So this particular island was devastated by Hurricane Maria, which happened in 2017. And they actually, 90% of operations in the island, which is a real country, it's only 73,000 people, but it's a country. That 90% of operations were stopped. They said they lost like 250% of their GDP in this hurricane. So what they are taking an initiative to improve resiliency in the island. And somehow through some connections, we got involved with a task force that that is working with those islands to build resiliency, but they didn't have a solution to how to build this resiliency. So actually, once they learned about Allovance, they asked us to create a resiliency scorecard to actually set up their resiliency goals. It's Colette, it's very similar to the ESG goals, you know, like you said, the ESG goals and the objective. This one is just for resiliency. And then we worked with them to set up the resiliency goals and objectives, anywhere from, you know, kind of improving their power generation from renewable sources, to eliminating fatalities. It's very interesting when you look at these priorities, and they're trying to align themselves, of course, with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, the SDGs, the 17 goals. But we went there and we actually met with all the permanent secretaries in the country, and we went with them. It was actually in the president's, what do they call it, Caio? Like the president's what? Residence or something? I don't know.
The president's residency, and we met with all the ministries, all the ministers.
Right, we met with all the ministers there, and we went through a pairwise comparison exercise with them then, you know, and their inconsistency came up very low. Actually, even though there was like 25 people in the room and we were comparing like 6 priorities, it was a great exercise. And so this is an application that we never thought of when we created Allovance, because typically when you think of Allovance, you think more of like capital allocation, right? And things of that nature. But we talked about ESG applications before, and now we talk about this resiliency scorecard. And now this made a big impact in the whole, like in the region. Caio, if you can tell everybody, like, you know, what's going on right now to expand that effort.
Yeah, it's really great. You know, Sharif and I have had the opportunity to over Zoom chat with, you know, representatives of nearly all the island nations in the Caribbean, and I think we've done 2 of these so far, and each one that we're getting better traction with them, and we're moving down the road. Looks like there's at least 2 nations that are very seriously considering doing it, and those are Barbados and Bermuda. Why Bermuda is considered part of the Caribbean, I don't know, but that's another issue. The other sort of interesting thing is that there's some of the more supranational organizations like CARICOM, which is sort of like the OAS of the Caribbean, that is interested in following this kind of program for, you know, pushing it across to all its members. So there's talk of them being the funder for numerous islands. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So there's also some not NGOs that all like EDF, which are interested in doing the same. So those are progressing. We're keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that we can push it out to the entire region.
So thanks, Kyle. So engagements in the Caribbean, I take care of it myself. Other engagements, we get other decision coaches to kind of perform those engagements. But it's very interesting that you know that we find new applications and find success in these things. So I don't want to talk for a long time because I know that we have a very busy schedule today. But I'd like to welcome you on board, and let's get on with it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll add that I was not invited to the Caribbean engagement either, so it's okay. But you know, I just want to piggyback off of that, and I appreciate you sharing that, because really the Decision Coach program is the part of Allovance that I'm most excited about, and the reason that I'm most excited about it is because we've created a tool, we've created a software to help align strategically, you know, decisions that you make with a scorecard, with what you want to do, goals, objectives, right? And our software really helps you operationalize any plan, whether it's a strategic plan, an HR plan, a capital plan, a CIP plan, right? So the issue is we don't have the expertise that our decision coaches do. We don't have the, the services, the expertise that our decision coaches do. And by seeing the different applications where our decision coaches have used Allovance, it's really just opened my eyes to the numerous amounts of different applications there are. And I'm really excited to share with you some of these applications, including the one that was just mentioned by my dad and Kaio. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. If there's any questions, again, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and address them as they come in. So looking at our newest case studies, the first case study that we are working with, one of our decision coaches, Colette, who is on the call here, is working, is the lead decision coach for this engagement, and we're using ESG Focus. So ESG Focus is a module within Allovance that was developed specifically for ESG and sustainability planning. So Colliers, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Colliers. They're a very big real estate development company, and they manage hundreds of these developments across different regions across the world. So what Colliers wanted to do was use the tool to measure and report how they're doing in ESG in each of these regions, and then identify ESG opportunities, goals, basically projects that will help them reach long-term success in ESG. So what have we done so far? We've worked with their strategic team to select objectives under each of those three priorities, ESG, so environment, social, and governance. Now, Colette's team at Blue Sky they're experts at ESG and at sustainability. So they have a standard list of priorities, of objectives under these priorities that you can choose from. They've got metrics for each of these objectives. And they also have projects that are, some sample projects that can impact each of these objectives. And so this is kind of what we share with the team, and then they decide which of the ones they want to choose. So these are the objectives. Yep.
Omar, I just want to add here that the purpose of these calls that we have here is maybe introduce people to kind of these things so that they might apply to what they to what they're doing. So I know for sure that Christina Sanborn too with Mazzetti is working a lot on sustainability, and Christina, I think Colette would be an excellent source for you if you're interested in helping your clients with ESG. Colette and her team are the absolute experts in this area worldwide, and I know, Christina, that you're big in sustainability as well, and that's what you're trying to help Mazzetti and your clients. So you guys can have a great conversation together if you want to share some ideas and thoughts, and I'm sure you can help each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, part of what we're trying to build here with our coach community are these relationships, so that we can get value and get feedback and expertise from the people that have it. So, we've decided on the objectives under each of the priorities, ESG, and then we actually quantified each of these objectives based on metrics that was developed by Colette's team at Blue Sky. Now, our next step is basically to solicit project ideas from project owners in each of these regions, right? And so we're going to figure out what projects can we do to help impact each of these priorities and make us successful in ESG. This is a very exciting project and a very big project as well. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how we'll be able to help them in ESG. We've recently been engaged with the City of Ann Arbor for phase 2 of our work. Now, last quarter, when we had our first call, I introduced the City of Ann Arbor phase 1 case study. So during phase 1, we implemented Allovance with 6 asset groups. You can see some examples of asset groups down there. It's basically departments. Our goal in phase 1 was to make sure that the software can replicate their 6-year CIP, their 6-year capital improvement plan. We, at that time, just a few months ago, we conducted administrator, project owner, and observer training for everybody to teach them how to access the software and to make sure that the relevant stakeholders have the correct permission. And so now that we've successfully completed all of that, the city of Ann Arbor has actually been creating their CIP plan for the past 2 years using Allovance. Our goal now for the remaining year this year is to work with the remaining 8 asset groups in the 4 steps: strategize, compare, quantify, and score. And then we'll work together as a big team to select a portfolio of projects for City of Ann Arbor to lead their CIP moving forward. So this is a very interesting project as well. And it's a very another very big project that was very data intensive. The capital improvement plan is a requirement in Michigan and a lot of other states for cities to create this every 6 years, or there's different mandates. And so this is a very good opportunity for Allovance, and we've been able to prove that Allovance can recreate a CIP for a big city such as Ann Arbor. Now, what's interesting is they already have some metrics and objectives. And as you can see from this slide here, these were the 5 priorities that they already had in the city of Ann Arbor. So that they had already come up with some priorities, as well as some ways to measure each of these priorities. Right now, the scales weren't standardized scales. As you can see, some of them have a 3 and some of them have a 2, so on and so forth. But they had some of this already, and they had thought of some of this already. So our job was to sit with the team and figure out, how do we turn this into Allovance, into a scorecard, right? And then into the quantification, and so on and so forth. As you can see in this picture here, they actually even weighed and compared priorities to each other. And for those of you, all of you who have been through the certification, you know what we say, which is this 0 to 100 scale. It doesn't really work unless you're thinking about it relative to one another, right? And that's not how they were thinking about it. They weren't thinking that safety preparedness was twice or more than twice as important as sustainability framework goals. And so that gave them a shift in thinking when we used the Allovance pairwise comparison process, and it helped them really understand what's important to them. This is just to wrap this up. This is how we set up the client and the model in the Allovance software. We broke down each of their asset groups into its own separate model, and then when we meet with that specific asset group, we're opening up just that model to meet with them. Now, we've created reports at the client level here, so that all of the data and all of those models are combined and aggregated into one report that they can see. And this is actually where they create their CIP plan. So they will click on this reports button, they will export that report, and they will publish that to the City of Ann Arbor website as their CIP plan. So that's the City of Ann Arbor engagement, and I'm looking forward to doing that one coming up here. Now, my dad took the thunder a little bit on this case study and explained it already.
But Omar, I have a comment on the previous model that sure. This is something that I want all the coaches to be aware of, is that if you create under one client, if you create multiple models, we have the ability to create a reporting mechanism where it will get data from all these models and generate a consolidated report. This is something that I want to make sure that all of you are aware of. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Allovance is a very flexible tool. And so if there's a specific need or your use case, we can work with you to get that done. And in this instance, this required a little bit of customization, but it was the most efficient way and effective way to get this project completed, instead of creating one model with all of these asset groups. So the case study that our Kaio is working on, as well as my dad, is this Blue-Green Economy Island Resilience Scorecard. So last call, I had introduced kind of their work with the Caribbean islands. And so this is kind of the next step after that. So they've created a resiliency scorecard for the islands of the Caribbean, and they were working with an Island Resilience Action Challenge Task Force. It's called the IRAC Task Force, along with members of Coastal 8 and members of the actual Caribbean islands, partnered together to create a scorecard to provide the following: effectively allocate scarce resources among the islands, link the strategy that they're doing with the budget, prioritize resilience projects and resources, create strategic and capital plans, and then measure the impact of investment and investment projects. So what's really interesting in this example is that the scorecard is really unique. I mean, because it's not based on traditional measures of GDP that have historically been used to create scorecards, but instead it's measured against what that specific island thinks is important to them for resiliency. And in a lot of these cases, as Kayo and my dad mentioned, the islands aligned these objectives with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. So yesterday, there was a webinar demonstration showing our work with this scorecard and how it's impacted the islands. It was incredibly interesting and very valuable. So I just want to point out that this demo or this demonstration will be available in the Decision Coach portal once it's made available to us. And I advise everyone to learn about this initiative, as it's a very interesting initiative. Now, there were some very interesting pieces that I got from the presentation yesterday, and I think my dad touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to include it here. This is the reason we're doing this, right? I mean, if an island gets hit by a hurricane and, right away, 24,000 people are don't have food, 43 of 44 water systems destroyed, 1.3 billion in losses, 226% of their GDP, right? I mean, this is like devastation for an island. And so being able to impact or help, or at least, move that needle forward a little bit in terms of resiliency, in terms of sustainability for something like this is a very powerful and very admirable initiative. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can support them more. Now, the scorecard itself that was mentioned looks like this for Dominica. This is what their Resilience Island scorecard looks like. As you can see, they chose, these are the 6 of the Sustainability Development Goals up here, and then within each goal, they've chosen certain objectives that they would like to track and focus on.
And Omar, again, I think you're looking at a feature here that we've added in quite a while now, but maybe not all the coaches know about it, that we can actually, within each objective, we can have this progress measure, the bar that has like a baseline target and the current status, so that you can look at these objectives and understand where you are in a glance. And supposedly the progress bar will be moving as we get some of these goals achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of what I will mention with the software updates. I did mention this feature last call, but we have updated it and we have really defined it and polished it. And so this is available for decision coaches who are interested in utilizing this. Please just reach out to us and we can enable it on your account. And what it does is it takes an objective and allows you to add, indicators and target, a baseline, a target, and a current status to it that you can manually update and change. The next case study that I want to talk about is with Southern Company Gas. And one of our decision coaches, Mark Efimoff, who is on the call, is leading this engagement. So Southern Company is a big utility company, and they are in the midst of transforming their business to adopt, digital utility best practices. So basically, the IT division of Southern Company needs a strategy. They need a capital planning approach to help them develop this digital strategy, but also align it with what their overall business strategy is so that they can better serve their customers, their employees, and their stakeholders. Now, Southern Company has been doing this process prioritization manually in the past. They were using Excel files. They were collaborating through email, and it was really, it was very difficult for them to pull this information together each year to be able to create a capital plan. So the Allovance solution basically streamlined the interaction between all of their stakeholders, right, all the way from project requesters. They had a very complicated process to get projects approved. They have project requesters, project approvers, estimators. They have a governance team. So they had a lot of additional roles that we initially did not have within Allovance. Mark did a fantastic job to take all of the data that was in that model, and then what we did for Mark specifically is we created a daily export of this data so that he can take the data and create even more detailed charts and presentations and graphs in Power BI. So what you're seeing here is Power BI, which is a Microsoft service. One of our goals is to embed this service into the Allovance software so that you can actually create these types of charts right from within the software. However, that is not currently available. So what Mark did was he exported the information and then created charts like this on their own.
So Mark, if I think you're on the call, I mean, how easy or difficult it is to take the export and use Power BI with it?
No, it works very, very seamlessly, and it opens the capability to numerous visualizations that helped satisfy this client's needs.
Okay. And the interesting thing is that now we're working with the IT department of that client. I mean, we usually work with like the capital projects, you know, departments and things like that. This is now with IT departments to help them with their digital transformation. So this is a very exciting project for us. And they purchased a really large Allovance license and also purchased implementation services from us that Mark is leading. So it's an exciting engagement for us.
Yeah, it's a really exciting engagement, and these big engagements. The reason I get so excited about them is because it proves our ability to handle a big project like this with a big company that has a lot of complexity, a lot of different factors. And so Mark did a fantastic job with them, and so I really appreciate his work and his input in this. Now, Mark was also involved in this next case study, which is with the Saudi Electricity Company. So this is the basically the main utility company in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And what they wanted to do was the investment committee, they approved capital projects through a stage gate process, but they didn't really have, you know, alignment on why they were making these projects. And each approval was just based on kind of the investment committee's members' opinion. There was no real rationale.
Yeah, and Omar, just to give an idea of scale to the people on the call here. I mean, we work with very large utility companies in the United States, and their capital budgets every year ranges between like $1 to $2 billion. That's like really large investment. This company here, they spend $8 billion every year. So just to give you a scale, that Allovance is going to be used to prioritize $8 billion worth of work, which is a very different scale than some of the other engagements that we did.
Yeah, no, it's and again, I think that, you know, as we continue to take on these big projects, we're able to prove the value that Allovance is able to really to make, to add structure, to add maturity, and to add alignment to their decision-making processes, no matter the size of the organization. So as I mentioned, there was no alignment between the projects that that SEC selected as what, you know, with their strategic priorities and objectives. And there was a little bit of urgency because now there was regulatory agency that were requiring SEC to demonstrate alignment of their capital projects with the business and regulatory requirements. So Allovance was able to provide, you know, a capital decision-making framework that linked their business priorities and objectives to their strategy. We were enabled to, we provided a project prioritization and optimization that is transparent and repeatable. We were able to measure the impact of each project against the strategic value scorecard, and you know, ultimately provide transparency into why decisions were being made.
So Omar, also another comment that I want to say, which is also a new area that we're going into, is that this company, because they're in Saudi Arabia, they insist that the license, the software, when they get the license, that it is hosted in the Gulf area. And I know, Wael, you're in Dubai, and I'm sure that you're facing some of these things with the companies over there. They insist that the data cannot be hosted outside of the Gulf area. And that's what we're working on right now. So we located, identified a couple of hosting services in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we're working with them to be able to do that. And once we do that, we will gain experience from how to host internationally like this, so that, for example, if we get asked to do the same thing in Europe or in South America or whatever, we'll be able to do this much more efficiently.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So what you see on the top left here is the scorecard that they created for the Saudi electricity company. On the top right is kind of what the project implementation plan was for Allovance. And so they're doing it throughout this year. But really, this to me was the most interesting, because this is how they used to do the process before. They had a stage gate process. They had a process that they already used, and what this is showing is that we were able to integrate Allovance into their existing capital planning process, right? And you can see here the project scoring is happening right here, and then the portfolio optimization happening in this area here. And so, I think the takeaway here is that Allovance is very dynamic, very flexible, and it's able to be integrated into processes that are already existing, right? And it just requires a little bit of customization to understand the appropriate fit. Now, I shared with you at a high level some of our new case studies. Our next piece of the presentation, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on two of those case studies. Kevin is going to share with us his work with I believe it's a manufacturing company, and then Barnaby will share his work with the phase 2 of the city of Battle Creek. So Kevin, I think you are first here. So if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Omar. So I can't use the real name of the company. We told them we'd keep everything confidential, so you'll just have to kind of guess who they might be. They are closer to the Caribbean than Ann Arbor because they're in Ohio. So that's kind of going in the right direction, but I haven't left the borders of the country yet. This was actually my certification project. It's an active client in the world, in my day job, if you will. It's one of my active clients. And they were faced with basically a tremendous amount of change. More than 90% of their business was directly linked to the internal combustion engine. Specifically, as the internal combustion engine goes away, 90% of their business is going to go away. There's no way around that. And that's because of electric vehicles. The products they were producing are not going to be on electric vehicles. So some of the internal challenges they faced, besides that kind of massive change coming at them, was no product development capabilities. So they've been a contract manufacturer. They have no product development capabilities to design something new that maybe they could control more of their future. All of their existing production processes were wholly aligned to the products they'd been making for several years. So it's not like they had flexibility in those production processes to start making something else. At the same time all this was going on, they were in a building, or they were on a site that had 3 buildings. They owned the top building, number 1. They owned the bottom building, number 3, but the building in the middle they didn't own. They were renting it from the prior business owner. And at one point he finally told them, get out of there. So they were faced with, what are they going to do to rationalize the facility? And then their ownership was going to close a sister division and had to move all that equipment into other divisions. And so some of that was going to come to this company. So all of this was going on. And this was a business, by the way, that had been in financial difficulty several years ago. That's when the current owner bought them. And so the first thing they had to do was obviously stop the hemorrhaging, stabilize the business, and prepare for growth. And just when they were getting ready to do that, all this stuff kind of hit them between the eyes. When the engagement started, and I had gone down there, I think Vikesh had gone with me the first time. I think Stephanie went with me another time. they had some project ideas already underway. Some of those projects were things they had to do. They didn't have a choice in, for example, getting new equipment from the sister division that was closing and supporting other customers. So some projects were underway. They had some other projects that they had been thinking about implementing just all on their own. So when we walked in, it wasn't like we're gonna build the scorecard. So this was really a strategic plan kind of engagement, by the way. They weren't going to build the scorecard and then start figuring out what projects they were going to do. Some were already underway. At the same time, they had some other ideas for new projects. So this testimonial is kind of paraphrased from what the president of the company had told me, that the process really did help them confirm that some of the projects they were working on were in fact in alignment with their goal. And you'll see their goal in just a second. And at the same time, it did identify some projects that were going to be of very little benefit to the company, and they abandoned those. So that was good, right? They didn't spend time and effort on projects that weren't going to do much for them. Next slide. By the way, this is a, relatively speaking to the case studies I've heard so far, this is on the left end of the distribution curve in terms of size of entity, okay? Like the Caribbean and Saudi Arabia, you are way to the right of the typical companies that we're dealing with on a regular basis. So this is an example of applying the process to a small entity. So their strategic value scorecard, remember they'd been a contract manufacturer and they saw opportunity in more fabricated assemblies. Although they were doing some fabrication, they wanted to expand more. They started talking about things like, I remember one project they were talking about was a possibility of making some kind of trash to energy device, okay? That they had some interest from some of the large theme parks. That was of course right before COVID, and then COVID hit, and then nobody was interested in doing any of that kind of stuff. But they knew fabricated assemblies would allow them to add more value. So that was their goal, and you can see their priorities. I guess it's a little hidden here in my view, but you can see their priorities, 5 priorities, and then the objectives under each one. And we went through the pairwise comparison and provided all the weights. I think what was not necessarily a surprise here, but it certainly confirmed or aligned with what they were thinking. You'll notice that the priority with the highest weight is new customers and markets. Well, of course, because their existing customers really weren't going to take them into the fabricated assembly area. They were going to have to go find new customers. So this just certainly aligned very well with what you probably would have thought, but this confirmed that was a critical area. And you'll notice under that, they need to identify new customers and markets. If they didn't do that, how are they going to move into that area? So next slide, please. So this is all the projects that some of which they had underway and some of which they were only thinking about doing. That footprint project over there in the upper right, that's the whole facility rationalization, very expensive. They actually ended up staying in one building, exiting 2, finding another building. So that was a very expensive, complex project, but significant strategic value. And you can see some of these, like upgrade the phone system in the lower left. And they didn't do that. It's like, but it was a project they had identified they needed to do, and some of these other ones that they had identified. So this is kind of how it's spread out. Overall, it doesn't have strong strategic value. It only scored a 38 in the center, so it didn't have a lot of strategic value. And I did speak with them about what that could mean is that the projects that you're looking at really aren't that strong towards really taking you towards your goal, right? So maybe that you could go back, or they could have gone back. They didn't, but they could have gone back and kind of rethought some of the projects maybe that they wanted to work on. And up above, you can see the strategic alignment against the goal. Obviously, new customers and markets, we already saw the weight of that. So that was a critical area. And they have, just so y'all know where this has come out, they have gotten into some new business. I think I have some pictures on the next slide. They got into some new business, giving them new equipment, new capabilities, new products. So what you're seeing in these pictures here on the left, those are decorative exhaust tips. So for those of you that still have a gas-powered vehicle, maybe a little bit on the higher end, you go back, you probably have chrome or black or, really nice looking. For a guy like me at my age, I really like dual exhausts, and dual exhaust tips, but they're going away. In the center, you're seeing some a more variety of projects that they're producing now. Okay. And on the right-hand side, that's actually the president he's holding a stamped aluminum plate. Now, they had never stamped aluminum in their history. That plate's about a 1/4 of an inch thick. And actually on the back side of it, you can't see it. There's some weld studs that they're actually putting those in place by hand, and then they're being staked. They're working on a robotics project now to put those in place for the staking. So they went from those exhaust tips, remember 90%, 90+% of their revenue, decorative exhaust tips. And now, I don't think I put the picture here. They're down to very few exhaust tips. One of the things they did, remember I mentioned they had no product development capability. They had been making an exhaust tip for the F-150. They lost that business to a Chinese company just when we were engaging with them as TAC. And they went off and they figured out how to redesign that exhaust tip. They did some math modeling and things like that with a company here in Ann Arbor, in fact. And they've been winning that business backhand over fist from Ford. So they did learn something about product development along the way. But overall, the takeaway from the project was that it absolutely confirmed some of the things they were doing. It confirmed some of the things they were thinking about doing and that they shouldn't do. And they've been very pleased with that outcome.
That is great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kevin. And you know, it's really intriguing. Some of these, specifically, I really like the projects because you're able to take it and break it down into, like, you know, these are very upgrading your phone system. It's a very defined project that you know, it's very clear, it's very task, and a lot of times people get confused between the difference between a project and kind of, you know, an objective and things like that. So these are very specific projects that can be done. There's a defined, this is how long it'll take, things like that, right? And then additionally, the fact that it's a kind of a smaller company versus what we've shown, it just shows that there is a fit with all types of companies to help them make sure that what they're doing is aligned with what they think.
Yep.
Kevin, this is actually really very interesting. So, you know, Omar, I would like to, we have like a 2-page standard kind of like case study template. I would like to maybe document all these case studies in this template and put it in the Decision Coach portal so that all our decision coaches, if they happen to work with a manufacturing company later on, they can use this intelligence into their work, you know?
Yeah.
So just to kind of add to that, I threw the question in the chat and we can come to it later, but your resiliency model for the Caribbean,
Yes.
I want to talk about the resiliency model for companies. Don't have to
That's
do
a
it today,
great, yeah.
but we need to talk about that, because when COVID hit a little over 2 years ago, it was all about those companies that had no ability to pivot. They got hurt the most. So I think there's a connection.
And maybe
there.
we can create some kind of a standardized resiliency model, like we call it company resiliency or something. That might be interesting, and maybe try to kind of share it with some companies, see what they think, and then build intelligence out of that.
Yeah, I would be very interested in participating in those conversations.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'd help with that.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, Kyle.
Sounds like we can create a team real quick here.
Yeah, for sure. No, there's a big need for that, and as Moses mentioned in the chat here, especially with the challenges that are coming in, they really need to be prepared.
And actually, I like what's going on right now with like an idea getting generated in the meeting and then having a small team working on it. You know, this is great. This is an outcome of this meeting that we weren't thinking about, but that's a great outcome of this meeting, is coming up with these ideas and creating a team that works on some kind of a standardized model. Then we can look at how to market that model and how to, you know, take it further. This is perfect. It's great.
I don't want to interrupt too long, Omar. But since we're talking about this, I was going to bring this up later. I've been trying to put together. We were talking about sort of the lower end of the spectrum too, right? The smaller companies, and as many of you know, I work with a lot of early stage technology companies, and there's no way they can afford us, but there's a real need for them to strategically think how they're going to grow. And I was I've been putting some thought around and some ideas around, and I reached out to Vikesh about this as well. And if we could put together a template similar to like the ESG or the resiliency templates that we can use very quickly with early stage technology companies to help them scale their businesses. And anybody who wants to, help me think through that it's welcome.
And Kaya, I can participate in that as well, because we are kind of an early stage technology company, and we've gone through a lot of this. And also Moses on this call had his own technology company startup before, and he sold it, and then now he's actually working with us to help us grow as well. So he has tremendous amount of experience in growing technology companies. So that can be a great template that we can standardize.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that piece in particular, and I think we're going to have after Barnaby does his presentation, I'm going to ask Alberto to just speak for a couple minutes on one of the methodologies that's being used called OKR, Objectives and Key Results, and how that can be aligned with Allovance. And I think it's similar to this concept of creating a scorecard, a standardized scorecard that can be used, for a lot of different companies, right? A lot of these things have come up in the past, a balanced scorecard approach, right? I mean, we've heard of that. That's, why not take that and create something? We actually have a tool, we have a software now that can take that scorecard and create alignment between it. And so that, I think we really have a chance to create some of these templates and then market them in a way with the software, with the tool to be something much more than just, here's a balanced scorecard, here's the 5 priorities that every company should think about. Well, what's the next step after that? And that's, I think, what we can help with.
And that's a good topic, Omar. I'd like to talk a little bit in the end also about strategic planning in general and how we're redefining strategic planning, because that's an important thing that we're going to post a lot of LinkedIn posts in the coming few days on this topic. So we might talk about it for a few minutes here today. We have time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So next up we have Barnaby, our decision coach from Allovance, who's going to talk to us about his phase 2 with Battle Creek. So Barnaby, please go ahead.
Hello. For those of you who were on here last time, you remember we did a little overview of the original engagement with the city of Battle Creek. And just as a quick refresher, they were using Allovance, and it's 3 years now that they've been using Allovance to develop standard scorecards for different project types in service to creating their consolidated plan. And that's a required document, much like capital plans or your CIP is a required document. The consolidated plan takes all those information and data and brings it together from a community development lens. So what's happening in our city in terms of where we invest, and this includes required areas such as like HUD for housing and urban development. The director for that group within the city of Battle Creek, Chris Lucier, has been a great partner in helping us flesh these pieces out, developed his own scorecard reporting and such, and that's taken it out to the community. So we've been working back and forth in community engagement. And so the city reached out and said, hey, could you help us be able to drill down on that consolidated plan into just the housing area? So they had at the outset 9 different companies, development companies, that had proposed projects that they wanted to build for housing developments and housing units of different types in the city of Battle Creek. And so we got together with the community, and it had people from the city, people from local churches for engagement. The city of Battle Creek, in their culture, the religious leaders in the community are very engaged in the community development pieces and wraparound services like housing and workforce development and healthcare. And so they wanted those voices as part of the strategic team. And so we brought the strategic team together, and this is the scorecard here that you see in front of you, where we ended up in terms of prioritizing the resources to ensure that all residents have access to safe, desirable, and sustainable housing to grow the community. And you can see how they broke down the different areas, the partnerships, attracting and retaining residents, equity. And this part I'm going to come touch on in just a minute here a little bit more. Community sustainability and environmental stewardship, as well as the stable, affordable, accessible. One of the things is, how do you combine these pieces into buckets? And what was, we'll get at on the next slide in just a minute here, is how we had to flip some of the steps around in going through the process to help them get at what they needed, and how they've kind of changed how they're using Allovance as a front end to get the projects they want, instead of scoring projects they don't want. So it's kind of, it's an interesting flip. But what has come up is the equity scorecard and the equity piece. And there have been some discussions that they will be, their plan is to reach back out, because they're working with several groups in their community in terms of how do we create more equity in our community. And so looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice initiatives, that just like ESG is a scorecard item where companies and organizations want to score themselves on their progress here, that social element of that is oftentimes reflective of equity investments, and how does a company represent their DEI efforts. So something to think about as you're working is that including these equity measures, which sometimes are subjective, more like we would like to see more cultural representation. What does more mean? How do you define that? Well, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. So these conversations are here in the scorecard. And so that's something to discuss, I think, later as we're talking about these templates, that this is another area where a template for DEI measures for organizations would be well worth the time investment. Next slide, if you would, Omar. So this was kind of, these are the steps. I know this is a lot of words on the slide, so I was trying to put it all in and be like, well, let's just, instead of having 3 slides, but it really does, I wanted to try and capture the process, and went through. And so I wanted to be clear, this was really 20-hour engagement with direct engagement with the client. And these were 2-hour sessions that were spread out over several months. And so it was bringing it to the group, working through a part of the process, and then having another. So we would do 2-hour meetings in a week. And then there would be 2 or 3 weeks where they would take their homework assignments, go back, work on things, rework it, re-edit it. We used Mural as digital, because this was all virtual. So we used Mural to do our Post-it notes and organize. And then in between, I took and drew arrows, grouping things together so they could see the process, where my thoughts were, where their thoughts were. And then we met with the strategic team in between. So we reviewed, we strategized, quantified the measures. So we went from strategize, and then we went to quantify. And in the quantify, developed some of the measures that were here, but then we tested a project. So we went right into test a project before we developed any of the other pieces, and before we did the weights. So you notice compare didn't happen until later. So this is what was a little bit unusual, is because they were trying to understand and come to an agreement as a strategic team about, especially around measures of equity and measures of inclusion is there. So one of the conversations was, is it realistic that a housing development will come in, build us a 40-unit housing development unit, and include space for Michigan Works or a employment office or a free clinic in their building as well. And so those type of conversations about wraparound, that's what they call wraparound services. Like Omar said earlier, things that you're familiar. I used to work with Michigan Works, and I've in workforce development, government, and workforce, those type of services. So I bring those lenses and expertise to the table in that. So that's where different coaches for different places, right? So having these conversations came around that we decided not to compare first, but instead take a test project. What would your ideal developer project look like? So we defined those traits. Then we went through and said, let's just run it in and score and see, do these areas as they score right now look right? Are we missing things? Are we accounting for things? And so we revisited the scorecard, adjusted our strategize step, and then went through the compare and found that we had really low inconsistency. I think it was 1%. And everybody was on board, and they're like, oh, understanding what's more important at this time. And so then we provided model access, and we're having small team meetings now, updating every few months just to check in. But one of the things that's interesting is this number 10, a developer scoring guide. And this is where they're flipping the model. So what they have done is they're holding off on putting any projects in, because going through the process, the city decided that what they would like to do is like, well, why are we giving this to them after the fact and scoring them, when in fact, if we let them know what we want up front, maybe they'll just give it to us. Maybe they'll say, we can do that, instead of wasting time on the front end. And they've done this with several other projects in different areas in terms of locating removal of blight in the city of Battle Creek. So looking at, this is what we want to see, pitch us your project. And they're using the project form almost as an application process. And we'd had some discussions about grants applications. Like, if you submit your grant goal is to fund these things, here's the priorities of the grant, the objectives, you use the project form as the application for the grant, because then you can just, it scores it right there. So we're doing the same thing here, is that they're developing a scorer guide where they're incorporating the priorities and objectives, not necessarily the weights, but the priorities and objectives, saying this is what we are looking for in a project. These are our priorities. How will you provide this to us? And then they're providing a version of the project form to the developers, because then they can score the developer projects and the developers themselves, and not waste time scoring a whole bunch of things that are completely out of alignment. So that's where we are right now, is touching base on helping them develop a scoring guide, and running through some test scores here and there. And I'm just consulting as needed. Sometimes it's a 5-10 minute call, and sometimes it's 2 months, and then it's another 2 hours. So
Sure.
yeah, that's where it's at right now.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Barnaby. I think some of, go ahead.
I was just saying that this is interesting now that they're using the project form as a developer scoring guide, kind of with some customization, of course, but that's a good application of that form.
Yeah. And additionally, I think the interesting pieces of this specific engagement, as Barnaby said, is, and we say this in the certification. I mean, you as decision coaches, you're experts at facilitation. You each have your own style of how you facilitate, and kind of the language you use and what you say. And we're there as a guide, right? And so, the tool is there to guide you, to guide the facilitation, but you guys are the experts. And so it's interesting to see how our process can change slightly from coach to coach based on how they want to apply it, and kind of what their flavor of planning looks like. I think, Barnaby, what you said is incredibly interesting too, around the idea of having those conversations to create metrics around what's high desirability for an objective is so important, that you can even take it one step further and go and say, here's what I'm looking for from a project. These high desirability metrics are what I want from a project, and seeing who's able to provide a project with those characteristics. So I appreciate you sharing that, Barnaby. Now, before we move on to the next piece of the program here, I mentioned I wanted Alberto, if you don't mind, just OKR is objectives and key results. It's another framework that's used for planning and for tracking, and it seems to be used quite often in Brazil. And Alberto is kind of working on figuring out what the alignment is between OKR and Allovance. And I think in our next call we'll have maybe a more detailed case study on that. But for today, I think it's more just a teaser. So Alberto, if you can just speak for a couple minutes on your experience with that.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Who heard about OKR before? Please raise your hands. All right. The first time I heard about OKR was in a startup meetings that someone presented, and I saw this is just another packaging of an old idea. So that was my first thought. Then I start to dig into, and I saw that it's not the same thing. It's a different thing than management by objectives that Peter Druck bring us in late 50s. And OKR was developed by Andy Grove of Intel. So that's the guy that invented the OKR. And so they run Intel with the OKR. So you know where Intel is. So see how powerful. And there was one guy that worked with him that took this idea to Google. So Google was yet a startup at that time. And with the OKR, they grew where Google is right now. So it's another big example. And from Google, it spread out to all startups. So if you talk to startups, they mention OKR. And what's the main difference between management by objectives? I think this is the key point to use Allovance. If you think in the management by objectives, in the 50s, as Peter Drucker designed it, you have an objective for the company, and then you break down for the areas unto the people level. And each objective will be let's say, a parameter for the bonus, for the compensation of this individual. So that was the main idea, good idea, but in practice, this means that come to a disaster. And why? Because as your bonus is linked to these goals, always people set the goals very low so they can achieve and they can earn the bonus. So it was something to make an incentive, and at the end it was a burden to many companies. This is one side. In the other side, some people faked numbers to have a big compensation. So like Enron and other cases that are public. So, and the OKR, one thing, it's not break down by responsibility, who is responsible for, but they break down, you set an objective and then you break this into key results. So what needs to be accomplished so I achieve these objectives? So this is a big difference. So they say, what we want to do, it's the objective, but how we will achieve this are the key results and how you measure. And so this, and you do not link this to the compensation bonus because you want to be challenging. So you made your compensation in other stuff, but not on this OKR. The OKR is to drive performance and to be challenging so people can set challenging goals, but achievable. So that's the main idea. So I think I thought this, and I was working myself in the new model for strategy planning, and I saw a perfect fit there. And I saw also a perfect fit with Allovance, because if you think for a minute, the objective is the strategic priority. We just need to make this translation. And the key results are the objectives. If you do this, you have Allovance perfectly fit for the OKR. And this is great because a lot of companies are using this as a standard process. So you have Allovance that can incorporate what is already going on in the companies. But one thing more, they have been using OKR just to track progress of goals. Now you can, with Allovance, you can use as a complete management system to include the projects and allocation and to see and to do a real budget linked to these priorities. So this is the main idea. So I saw the previous conversation in this meeting to create some groups. So I think this is a kind of idea that we can move forward together. And in the next quarterly call, if possible, in the agenda, I can present a conceptual model in Allovance of that I'm working right now. So
absolutely, Alberto. This is
present a real case.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
can brainstorm with you also, on this, because at a high level, this is great,
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Alberto. I think this is really intriguing, and specifically when you say, I mean, a lot of these frameworks are basically old ideas that are just repackaged, remarketed into this cool new thing like OKR, and then it just goes viral, right? But really, when you just take a look at what OKR actually is, it's just objectives and key results, and it's literally just the strategized step of Allovance. There's nothing else after that, right? And so I think we have a real opportunity to become a standard for strategic planning, for planning in general, and that's where a lot of our investment is going towards right now from a marketing standpoint, is to get to educate people on kind of Allovance, on this new way of planning that is both a methodology but a tool as well. So wonderful. So thank you for sharing, Alberto, and thanks again, Barnaby and Kevin, for your detailed case study presentations. As usual, it looks like we're running low on time, so I will try to be quick with the next section here. Stephanie, I think if you can just come in here and talk about our Decision Coach program and where we are so far in terms of decision coaches.
Sure, and I'll keep this super short. So we're really excited about the interest in the program and the individuals that are going through it. So in 22, we had 4 coaches that completed their live engagement and have their official Allovance Decision Coach certification. We currently have 5 coaches that are working through those training modules, and 6 that just need that live engagement to be to get that final decision coach certification. So we have a list over there, and you've seen everybody in the chat. So please feel free to reach out, connect, as that's the purpose of this call. Next slide. So this is just, what you receive. We have our certificate of completion once you complete the actual decision coach modules that's issued by EGI here at the University of Michigan. And once you do your live engagement, you will receive your Allovance Decision Coach Certification of Achievement from Allovance directly. If you have not received this, think you should, or have misplaced it, you can always just reach out to me and I can assist you in either getting it reissued or letting you know what's missing and why it's not been issued yet. So, kick it back over to you, Omar.
Sure, thank you so much. And I do advise, if you guys have a chance to look through this presentation, I would advise looking at the different consulting organizations or companies that our coaches come from. It's a very impressive group of people and group of companies that we have here, and I look forward to continually growing this list. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second because I have to reshare with screen with sound on, because I have a cool video to show you. So we are developing materials right now for marketing, as I mentioned. And one of that materials is a testimonial video that we have done with the City of Ann Arbor and City of Battle Creek. Now, the testimonial video is around the software and our overall engagement with them, but there's pieces that are around the decision coach and the value of a decision coach. And we're actually creating videos specifically for decision coaches and to market kind of the decision coach program. Now, this is not the full decision coach video, but this is kind of a teaser. And I'll go ahead and play that now. If you cannot hear it, please just make a note, let me know in some way. And here we go.
The Allovance decision coaches were very important to us. They came in and actually met with groups of staff from each of the 6 asset groups where we wanted to develop strategic values to use for scoring, and they were very good at pulling out of staff what was important by asking a lot of focused questions.
Allovance not only is a guide in helping teach communities like us and our staff how to use the tool, but in instances when we ever doubt that it's something that we can maybe facilitate or develop on our own, it's nice to have the ability to have a coach come in and to be able to help us with that process, which we've done and used Allovance in both types of ways here at the City of Battle Creek.
So I would definitely recommend Allovance for any community that's thinking about doing some planning work or that just wants to introduce more strategic planning into the everyday decisions that they're making.
I want this cool picture to complete because I really like the brain here. But so that's just a teaser of kind of the Decision Coach video, right? But it does speak to the value that our coaches bring to the engagements. And one of the recurring themes that we always hear anytime we complete an engagement is the most valuable part of the process was the facilitation by the Decision Coach. And so again, with that being said, we really want to try to invest in materials and videos that will help to present that value and make that value known to our clients. This video, once it's complete, will be available, of course, on the Decision Coach portal as well. Now, speaking of the Decision Coach portal, many of you, all of you have probably received an email in probably a couple of months ago now, introducing you to the new Decision Coach portal. For those of you who have logged in and seen it, some of this material, some of this information may be repetitive, but I wanted to just quickly let you know what's in this new portal. So first and foremost, the portal design has been updated. So it looks much cleaner. And it's much more user-friendly. The content of the portal, as I had talked about last quarterly call, we've included now marketing materials such as brochures, case studies, templates. We have sales pitch decks. We have sales scripts. We have videos and webinars. These learning calls that we're doing will be on there, as well as just in general, our community of coaches. Now, this has been an ongoing issue, and I know part of it is from our end, and I do apologize. We are working right now to consolidate the login to one login that will work for both the portal and the software. However, that is not the case right now. So as of right now, the Allovance software is a separate username and password than the Decision Coach portal. Okay, and that's very important because a lot of times there's confusion between those two. So everyone on this call has a separate login to the software than their portal. And to reach any of these areas, you click sign in at the top right here. If you want to get to the portal, you click on the portal. If you want to get to the software, you click on the software. If you have any issues at all, or if you're not able to reset your password or anything like that, just send me a message and we'll get it resolved and fixed. Now, within the actual portal, you're going to find a lot of similar information as you did in the previous portal. Of course, the main thing is the modules. We want to use this portal as a way, once you graduate from Curator, all of the content that you learned still stays with you so that you don't have to log into that Curator learning platform. So this is where you're going to find that content from Curator. So the modules, all 10 modules are here as they were in your certification course. And then clicking on a specific module, each module is broken up by the kind of the different sections. If you remember from the certification course, such as introduction, critical concepts, facilitation, so on and so forth. Towards the right are the resources that are within this module. So if you just want to go into this module and look for a specific document, you can do that right away. In the videos section of the portal, we've broken down our videos into 4 kind of filters. We have software tutorials. This is going to show you just quick clips of how do you add a client or how do you delete a collaborator. We have walkthroughs by the founder. So these are the, if you have time and you want to spend an hour looking through a detailed case study of how we've utilized Allovance with, I think it was the state of Michigan. It was the case study that was used. We have walkthroughs there. We have webinars, so these include things like these types of calls, as well as webinars we've done in the past around strategic alignment, around decision-making biases, and any future webinars, of course, that we will do. And then we have marketing videos that include, for example, the whiteboard video that's on our website, so you can directly send that to someone, as well as any future marketing videos like the one you just saw in a few slides ago. So if we go into the materials section, I think this is probably the most exciting new addition to the portal. So the materials section is now broken up into 4 categories: branding and images, business development, coach submissions, and marketing materials. Basically, what this materials section is designed to do is to provide you as coaches as much information as you need to be able to integrate Allovance in your own practice, in your own world. You know, whether it's information about how do I give a demo about Allovance. We have a demo script right here that's a very detailed 7-page script of exactly what you should say during the demo. We have, you know, value proposition documents here. Like, what are we think? How do we describe Allovance when we're talking to clients? What is the differentiation? We have brochures here, like the capital allocation brochure and the trifold brochure. This is an example of one of our sales pitch decks, like one of the slides. So we've got sales pitch decks that you can use, customize, make your own. And then, you know, some other just miscellaneous information, for example, our technical architecture, our tech stack. You know, some companies want that information before they hire you, things like that, right? And so all of that information is in there now. One of the areas in particular that I think is interesting is the coach submissions area. So we have an area within there where you know, the coaches can actually submit assets that you may want to share with the fellow community. We have a couple of examples of assets in here already that you can find under the coach submissions tab. This includes a case study, for example, that Mohammed wrote about his work with First Energy. This includes, I believe, a sales pitch deck that was written by one of our previous decision coaches and how she used it to sell. Trudy is not on the call today, but she created a very, very nice PowerPoint presentation in the certification to help engage with clients in the very beginning. So that's something else that I'd like to add there with her permission. So this is what this area is for. Now, we also have included a profile section that's a little bit more developed than the profile that was there in the previous version of the portal. I do advise you, if you have time, to go in there, fill in some of the information as you want, you know, maybe the industries that you want to work in, some of the services that you offer, so on and so forth. You know, eventually our goal with this will be to create some sort of directory of coaches similar to what you're seeing down here, that we can use either to for us to assign new business to, or just as a directory that, you know, any potential clients can come and look at and find coaches in a specific industry, specific location, something like that. Now, that's the Decision Coach portal, and I'm moving a little bit quickly through this just for the sake of time. But if you have any questions, again, please just write them in the chat. I'm going to talk a little bit about some updates from a company standpoint and some new software features that we've implemented in the last 6 months or so. So we are continuing to hire software engineers. We're growing quite a bit, and we want to, as we grow, we want to make sure we continue to, you know, update our software and add best practices and best features to it. So if you have any candidates in mind, or if you know someone who from this standpoint, please check out our careers page, allovance.com careers, or LinkedIn for more information. We are doing new partnerships with Allovance. If you remember our last quarterly call, we had partnered with Blue Stire to introduce ESG focus. You know, now we are and we've mentioned this before, we're partnering with Coastal 8 potentially to create kind of this resilience scorecard, and we've gotten a lot of interest on the call for today. So we might, you know, create a kind of a small task force or a small team to help kind of complete this. Another really exciting area for me is we really would like to create a decision coach program membership to allow our coaches, for example, revenue sharing opportunities and opportunities to sell Allovance when they're working with clients who are interested in and earn, additional ways of revenue. Now, this program membership is pretty early on in its development. We have some solid ideas of how we want it to look. However, we are very intrigued and interested to hear your ideas. So if you have some ideas on different, models that you've seen in the past for program models that you've seen in the past for revenue sharing, et cetera, please, reach out to me, share them with me. Our goal is to launch this in 2023, in the beginning of 2023. As far as software updates, we've made a lot of quality of life improvements, and then a few kind of bigger updates. I'm going to talk first about the kind of the bigger features. We have a new view feature that allows you to save a view. For example, let's say if you're not familiar with this area of the software, this is the score step or the project table, right? So this is the project table. There's a bunch of projects under here. Let's say I want to filter projects with only strategic value in, greater than 60, and I add that filter. Now, let's say every time I log into the software, I want to only see that filter, that list of projects. So once I add that filter, I can save that view as a custom view, for example, projects with strategic value greater than 50. And now from this drop-down list, I have a new view that I can access anytime I want. Now, this view can also be shared with collaborators such as project owners and observers. So you can actually share this view with them so that they can see a specific set of, attributes, filters, columns, whatever it may be. My dad mentioned this earlier as well, strategic priority and objective tracking. So this feature is now available. As you can see, you're able to add kind of what your baseline metric is, your target metric, and then where you currently are for each of these, as well as decide what is the metric. Is it fatalities? Is it percent? Is it, whatever that metric may be. As far as quality of life improvements, there's been a lot of things that we've added. I'll quickly just go through them. A lot of these have actually been decision coach requests, so I really appreciate that. And I think some of these, Kevin, you actually helped to get these launched. So they were very good ideas that we worked on implementing. So this includes things like when you're on the strategic value scorecard, you can actually click on an objective and directly go to the quantification of that objective from the strategized step. You can now reset the comparison slider. So let's say you're working with a group and you want to reset all of these weights to 0. You can reset that in the compare step with a button. I think this one specifically, Kevin, was one that you had mentioned, was when we're working in the quantify step, these experts need to be able to see what the descriptions of the objectives are that they're working on. So we've included these objective descriptions in quantify. We've updated our collaboration emails to be much clearer on what the roles are, and we've added articles, health center articles for each role to be much clearer on what they're doing. We have new project fields and project field types. So the types include things like you can now create a new project field type that's a text area. This means that you have formatting options as well for that field. But we also have new fields such as created on, updated on, created by, and updated by. So these are system generated fields that are included in every project that you can add to your project table. So you know, when did someone update my project, who updated it, when did they create it, and who created it. In the select step, our new default view for strategic alignment is the one with the targets now. So once you go to the select step, you'll be able to notice that. And we've also added the ability to attach files to the project form, which is another highly requested feature. Now, the biggest feature that we're really working on is Collaborate version 2.0. We're updating our collaboration completely. And the way we're doing that is, instead of the way it works right now, is you have to add a new user for every role that you want, right? It doesn't really make sense, and you have to do it for every model too. So this collaboration update, it's going to live on the client level So when you add it when you add a user, it's going to add to all the models, right? Or you can select which models. But also, we're adding much more sophisticated permissions. And as you can see from this chart, this is kind of a preview of potentially what it's going to look like. But every single step of the process is going to have permissions. So now you're going to be able to add users and say, okay, this user can score, these projects, but can't view the scorecard, can do this, but can't do this. So now you have a lot more flexibility on the roles, and you can create now new roles and new permission, new roles basically, in addition to the project owner and those 4 or 5 default roles that we have within the system. So this is a very exciting one. And I look forward to it. So in terms of timeline for all of this stuff, in quarter 1, we focused on updating our best practices for security, and we finished that. We're right now in quarter 2, we're working on Collaborate version 2.0. So we anticipate that this will be done in the next month or so. After we're finished with that, we plan to continue with additional visualizations around the Gantt chart and around the cost schedule table. For example, embedding Power BI, embedding those kinds of things. One of the most exciting things that we're looking forward to, hopefully we'll get to this year, is redesigning the Allovance software. We've already created a new design for the software. We have it ready. We have new features that are ready to go with that updated design. It's a matter of just getting to work and doing it. And so this is a piece that we are focusing on in the latter of this year, and I'm very hopeful that we can get it done by 2023. And that will include now best practices, for a SaaS software. So with that being said, it looks like similar to last time, I brought you guys right up to the minute where we were ending. I'll just end with, we really are trying to build a community here. And I really, really love these conversations that we're having together. And I think the best way to continue these conversations is through, LinkedIn and through these areas where we can continue, reaching out to each other and building relationships. So please follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Please, engage with our posts that you find interesting, and I hope that you found that this was helpful and you learned something today. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Omar, for the effort that you put in with the Stephanie and the EGI team to get this great document going and great discussion. I highly encourage every coach to go to the portal and update their profile, because maybe you want to communicate with another coach or something, and that's where everything is going to live. So I highly recommend that. And we're all looking forward to the next learning call in 3 months and continue our expansion and growth. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks Stephanie and Ashley again. I can't, you guys are very helpful, and Kevin and Barnaby, appreciate your time today for the presentation. I know we do have some questions here. So if you have a couple minutes, Kevin, maybe we can just talk quickly through that if you want. I think there was another question too. Kyle asked, but I don't know if Kyle's on if he is. Okay.
Yeah, I can stay for a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you. So, in terms of resilience, I think this is a very interesting question. So the question is basically, how might we use the resilience scorecard concept to help companies be prepared for, events such as COVID? I'm just going to add from my perspective, just really quick. The example I saw was kind of reactive versus proactive. The example I saw with First Energy, that Muhammad shared was, okay, we have a budget, we have a strategy, COVID hits, everything gets reduced by like half. How do we change now and adapt to that? So were you going to share some ideas? Maybe go ahead, Sharif.
No, I think that it's like you said, we want to be proactive, right? We want to create a model that companies can use to plan for their resiliency and not just react to it, right? We all know that we can react to it using Allovance like we did before by prioritizing, what we have. But creating something that is forward looking. I think we can adapt like we can adopt the resiliency scorecard, because that's like have resiliency. It's a different types of resiliency because we're talking about organization, company resiliency. And I think maybe we can create a focus group out of the decision coaches here. I'd be happy to participate in that, but I know for sure that Kayo would be a great resource for that as well. Not only because he's working on the resiliency scorecard, but because of his work with SBDC and working with startups and making them more successful. So I think, Kevin, this is a great thing that we can do, and maybe create an independent model that can be marketed independently for companies to improve their resilience.
Yeah, this is Kyle. I've done a lot of reading on this, and there's a lot of, if anyone's interested, and maybe I can find them and put them on a portal or something, but there's a lot of articles by McKinsey and Company on company resiliency and really this whole idea of resiliency as a competitive advantage. Anyway, but I'm happy to work on this. I think there's some legs to this concept.
I think similar to what Alberto was discussing about OKR, I think Allovance is the single tool that can operationalize all these things. OKR, scorecard, resiliency, all of these things, we can use the same tool in one place that we can operationalize all of these things, right? So I think similar to what Alberto was talking about, with just a simple change, we can have Allovance become an OKR tool, right? And then everybody can use it as an OKR. And I'm looking forward to Alberto, I'm looking forward to your presentation in 3 months, hopefully, about that. And you know, continuing the discussions that we had with the company in Brazil about adopting that to some of their clients. So this might be a great case study coming up. So Allovance is flexible enough that it can be used to that. So I highly recommend creating focus group for this resiliency idea, because it's something that everybody needs.
Yeah, this was, you know, what we saw during COVID with all the clients that we dealt with. We had some clients that, I'll just say, rather seamlessly pivoted. We had other clients that they couldn't pivot at all. And I was in some early conversations with some people at that time about how do we go in and assess a company's ability to be able to pivot for unexpected events.
And
so
Kevin, I had this similar discussion with Alberto before. Alberto been working in strategic planning forever. And I thought maybe today we'll have a few minutes to talk about strategic planning, but we don't. Maybe we make it next time. But Alberto has some great ideas about, in general, how to help companies grow, right? And maybe creating standard. I think, Alberto, you told me you have like 3 distinct priorities that if you apply them, it can apply to any company, right? So it's a new philosophy that he came up with over the years. I think we can create a focus group that can work on that a little bit and create a model that can be marketed to companies, you know, to help them do that.
Yeah.
Yes, positively. Yeah.
Yeah, I think specifically the piece, Kevin, that you're mentioning, like the company's ability to pivot, right? And how do we quantify, you know, how nimble they are and how flexible they are to be able to respond. You know, like the company that you mentioned, it seemed like 90% of their stuff was one thing, but they were able to pivot to something else. So how do we quantify that ability? And I think that's really interesting. And we can work on doing that.
Yeah, I'm happy to participate in any group you want to form to.
We'll get that.
Because I know that'll benefit some of our clients. So.
Yeah, we'll get that organized. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I think Kayo, I think you just had a quick question about like templates versus individualized approach, right? And I think my philosophy there is, let me just read your question.
Yeah, I mean, so if I could explain it really quickly, the issue is, especially with smaller companies, I was thinking specifically about something for, you know, early stage companies. And, you know, when you're looking at an engagement, you're looking like at 50 grand plus for an engagement, right? Which is way out of most of those people's leagues. But if we can abbreviate the time we have to spend utilizing a template, it might become possible, right? So you don't deviate too much from, you know, the template, and it's not as individualized approach. And I'm just wondering,
This is kind of, Kyle, this is kind of what we did with ESG, right? I mean, with ESG, we have the three priorities, E, S, and G, and then the flexibility is just in the objectives. Like we have, what objectives do you want to use under here, under here, under here? But even the metrics are kind of standardized somehow. The targets for the metrics can be different. So for example, a metric can be improve sales. That's a metric that you can use every time. But maybe one company would say improve sales by 20% and another company would say improve sales by 5%, right? So we make it, like we make most of it standardized and then give them the flexibility just to do something here and here and here just to make it their own.
So
that's
it's sort of so it's like a cafeteria plan, really.
Yes.
So,
right,
exactly. And I'm just wondering if we, from a software perspective, we could actually go in there and say, okay, ESG is easy, environmental, social, and governance, right? That's there. Every objective, there is a cafeteria of objectives, let's say 10 under each vertical, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you check the ones you have. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you have measurements under each of those. You check the ones there. Okay.
Yes.
And then projects, we could have, sample projects. We can do the same thing.
We even have that in ESG. We have like 80 sample projects.
Again, checking those off. That way, you've just collapsed the whole consultation period or significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the three areas in the software where I can see we can add standardization.
And then so the implementation is going to be significantly smaller, which will save them a lot of money. And then they can purchase that model for also significantly less amount than like a typical organization would spend to buy the whole Allovance software, right? Because it's limited in functionality. You don't have a lot of the functionality, but that's why you're paying a less amount, and then they can use it themselves all the time.
Yeah.
That's exactly the model, Sharif. I think I've mentioned to you corporate value metrics and the value opportunity profile. It's exactly the model they have. They have 3 levels of their opportunity profile software. The first one they call essential, and then I think it goes essential. One of them is growth, but anyway, the essential level is free, but it's very limited. Right?
Very limited. Yeah.
Gives you a taste, and then if the company's interested, then they go to the next level.
That's what we should be heading. That's what we should be heading for sure.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'll look that up too.
That's how we're able to do that.
I know if you need information, let me know.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. Can you just tell me what was that called?
Corporate Value Metrics is the company.
Okay.
And the product is the value opportunity profile, the VOP. We actually use that tool with clients, as do people called certified value growth advisors, blah, 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 blah. Vikesh is one of those if you want to know more about that.
Okay, interesting.
It's basically evaluation methodology.
Okay, wonderful. That's really helpful.
Yep.
Barnaby, you were saying something?
I was saying that's why we were able to shorten down the Battle Creek engagement, because we had that consolidated plan that we could drop in. And I've done the same thing with school boards and parent teacher board groups where their certifications, they have to have certain things in their plan. So you just drop those in as priorities right away. And it cuts through a lot of the early work, because you know what you need to talk about and you're not having to figure out what you're going to talk about. So those small engagements, especially, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm working in my model. It's suited for these small companies using OKR, and it's a perfect fit for what Arcadio is looking for, I think.
Okay, very good.
So.
Great, that would be real helpful.
Thank you all. I really appreciate your time today. We'll send the recording once it's available.
Yeah.
Good to see all of you.
Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.